Yo, how's that? This looks awesome. What the fuck? Okay. Um, hey, I'm gonna try to look into the camera as best I can. I just want to talk about. I just want to sit here and just see what comes out, and the light's coming out, and it's fucking awesome. I was hoping the sunshine would come out, and it's looking cloudy, but God's smiling right now. So, um, I just wanted to make a video on. I hope this isn't too. I'm just gonna roll with it. The issue I have with making spontaneous videos with no script or I like to edit my thoughts and make something refined and really accurate. And when I notice when I talk, I can leave out accuracy for spontaneous thought and feeling. But I feel like I feel called to sort of sit here today and make this video. So don't mind the mark on my head. I was just doing rehab before, some weight on my head for the neck rehab. So we're going to talk about neck rehab today and see what else just sort of comes out. And I just want to sit here and just see what comes out that I could use. And there's a few other. The reason why I wanted to make this video is because there's other neck rehab videos out there with regards to like the other neck rehabs that I'm aware of, like ATG, and I didn't bring my notes. No, I'm probably not going to go back inside. Just see what comes out. There's a neck protocol for the neck from ATG, and they had a collaboration with Enzima. And the thing with that neck rehab is that it doesn't utilize or make use of the concentric only range progression, and that's a big deal because if you incorporate that, then you can rehab people with really badly damaged necks. And I had the most damaged neck, I think, from anyone that I know of and anyone in ATG, and I've been able to rehab it and get it out of pain. And so the concentric only range progression and also just offer an add-in, like a more ideal way, directions of the neck that could work for more people. Okay, so what's the big deal with concentric only range progression? Well, concentric only, the part of that phrase means, the concentric only part of that phrase means that you're removing the eccentric. So it's a more ideal sequence because you're bypassing the eccentric, and the eccentric is when you're like lengthening under load, and it's a more tear-like motion, and it's the most structurally damaging. And when you're injured and damaged, you kind of want to cheat that, and because it's that damaging that you're unable to get as ideal of blood flow and stimulus in with too much damage. And so what the concentric only does is it bypasses the eccentric and emphasizes more the concentric squeeze. And what that does is it emphasizes the more blood flow inducing motion, and the blood flow inducing motion is concentric. It's that squeeze. It's the squeeze through the vascular tissue. I'll put this here, hopefully you can hear me okay. So it's the squeeze through the vascular tissue, and what that does is, can you see me all right? That's a lot better. There are other neck rehabs out there from ATG, and mainly what there is that there's that collaboration with Enzima, which uses the directions of the neck, but it doesn't utilize the concentric only range progression. And that's a big deal because when you incorporate the concentric only range progression, and I'll explain what that is, essentially you're just removing the eccentric. So you're bypassing the eccentric, as a way Bulletproof Baller likes to call it, and then you're making use of the concentric motion. And the concentric motion is the more squeeze motion, and the eccentric is the more lengthening under load motion. So the eccentric is the more damaging motion, and the concentric is the more blood flow inducing motion. And when you take out the eccentric, really damaged people are able to tolerate that stimulus a lot more, and you're able to save people that couldn't be saved by just using regular reps, from not, you know what I mean, just regular reps wouldn't save them. So when you remove the eccentric and keep it concentric dominant, you're able to get more blood flow into the damaged ligaments and tissues and musculature, tendon, whatever, and you're able to help more damaged people. And this is a concept that hasn't been expressed enough in detail and isn't that popular. It's there within ATG's Rehab. So concentric only range progression. So we're explaining concentric only, just removing eccentric. And then the range progression just refers to shorter range plus longer range. And why is that important? Well, if you have a damaged tendon or ligament, the longer range is going to stress that and emphasize that tissue more. Why? When you stretch, what ATG figured out and popularized really well was that when you stretch a muscle, you're also leaning more on the tendons, on the insertions. And so you can emphasize this and stress and develop your tendons and ligaments by training through the longer ranges of motion. But the issue is, if you have a damaged insertion, you can't start there because it's really damaging. And so what's more ideal and better than doing that is bringing blood flow into that damaged tissue so it's more compliant, it's more comfortable. There's an analgesic effect with the pump and the blood, so it's less painful, it's more compliant, so you're able to gain more length and receive stress to that tendon better. Less painful, more comfortable, more compliant. Like, it's just the way to rehab. Like, there's no, okay, so there's that. And so what you want to do is start at the shorter range, and the shorter range, let's say like a standing bicep curl versus a Smith curl, where it's like this like crucifixion thing, for the biceps. So this would be under stretch, and for the tricep, this would be like, the kickback would be a short muscular range for the tricep, and then the overhead French press would be a really stretched tricep, and that would help you stress more. And what it does is, this is my nuanced perspective from, well, this is like, what I'm saying is true, but I'm also adding in my more damaged perspective. I don't think anyone in ATG has been as damaged as me, which helped me to feel out the more nuances, and I can't stress the importance of, okay, so I'll finish explaining the short range. So the short range is we all train short range too much in the gym and stuff. Like a muscular guy, bodybuilder type, would be a more short range build or muscular build, and they tend to, what the short range does is it stresses more it emphasizes the peak contraction and the vascular range, the vascular tissue, the muscle, without leaning on the tendon and connective tissue. And so you want to start at that shorter range, accumulate a pump at that range in a concentric only way, removing the eccentric as much as possible, or ideally, right? And then you increase that range. So you start shorter range or shorter to mid range. I like to call, well, we'll get into the more explanations later, but you start shorter range and you accumulate a pump, and then once that's accumulated enough and good enough, or as much as possible, whatever you can handle, then you want to increase the range a bit, and then you're starting to lean and increase the range a bit and get a pump at that range, and then increase it a bit more and accumulate that pump at that range, and then increase it more. And we're getting into long range. So over here would be short range, here would be long range, but we can't start here. We have to start here, because all the blood is in the vascular tissue and the muscle. Muscle naturally has more inherent blood flow, more resting blood flow, which is why muscle heals faster and joints tend to take a lot longer. And so, but we can, why tendons and stuff, tendons are less vascular tissue, they're not the same as muscles, but they do have anabolic properties, which means that they can hypertrophy, just not as crazily as muscles can, right? So they're a more endurance-based tissue is our way of looking at them. And they're entirely different tissues. So the importance of this, I think partly I'll also talk about like what's happening with me and why my rehab's taken so long. Because I haven't had just one injury. I've had, if you read my post, if you didn't, some people didn't read it at all, but there's a lot to make sense of, which is why some people on the outside looking in are a bit confused. And then, so you do that range progression in that concentric only way, the concentric only range progression. That's what that means, and that's so. And then that's what ATG figured out. Now, why is this so important? Why is this better than isometrics? Why is this so important? Why am I so committed to this? Why am I so all in on this? Why am I so enthusiastic and passionate about it? Is because it's been a newer discovery. And that's what this whole knees over toes, if I could summarize ATG, Athletic Truth Group, in a way that most people could understand, it would be like this. And explain, if I could explain ATG in the most simplest way that most people could understand, it would be like this. So the knees over toes guy, all he was, he's more than just the knee guy, but what his thing was, there was scientific literature that came out saying when you squat with your knees past your toes, it's risky because there's more pressure on the knee, and that's true. But all knees over toes guy was trying to do was just be like, hey, that's true, but you can get to that range of motion safely, and actually if you're stronger in that position, you're way less prone to injuries and tendon issues at the knee, because the ligaments and tendons at the knee are more adapted and stronger and able to handle that range. It takes a certain amount of capacity, tendon ligament capacity, to handle that, and strength and range of motion and muscular range of motion. And that was his main penetration into mainstream understanding. And I'll segue to low back ability, and his main sort of mission and purpose is that there's a lot of everyone would have heard this, that you don't round with your spine, like lift with a straight spine, don't round your spine because that's where issues hurt, right? And that's true, but the reason why that happens is because we never train in rounded spine positions, and so the ligaments have never been developed enough. And then as we get older and train and get stronger deadlifts and whatnot, these ligaments are still like babies, you know what I mean? And they just can't hold what our muscles are doing. And it's the same thing for the knee with the knees over toes guy. It's like you'll see heavy squatters and they'll get into a full knee bend and blow out their knee, but it's because they were only training half reps and box squats and stuff, and then never trained that range with that amount of weight and load incrementally, carefully, safely, by getting a blood flow in it in the least damaging and most effective and ideal way. And so that's sort of, I don't think that, okay, so those two people are an example, and then I'll finish with this third point, was that the shorter plus longer range concept, the shorter muscular vascular blood flow range plus the longer connective tissue range, the magic is done when you do them right next to each other. You don't want to do short range one day and then long range on a Tuesday or whatever. The magic works when you do them as close to each other as possible. Why? Because the pump that's accumulated from the short vascular muscular range is going to help you get into the longer connective tissue, tendon, ligament range, right? Because the blood and the warmth from a blood flow, when that bathes these tendons, ligaments in blood, when you bathe these tendons and ligaments in blood, they're more compliant. They're more able to receive load. They're more pliable. They're more able to do what you want them to do. And they're more able to receive stress with more comfort and less pain. And it's also an analgesic effect. So the blood takes the pain away as well. And you might have heard how Ben used backwards walking to get off painkillers. It's because it's a blood flow thing. I've got 10% left, so I've got to wrap this up. And my final explanation for most people to understand ATG would be like, there is a short and long range wherever there is a muscle. And so this principle works all over. And what people don't know about the spine is that there's muscles and erector all in the spine, all interwoven into spine. So it's not like don't round your spine. It's about how can we gradually get stronger in this rounded position. The spine's meant to round. The spine has all these muscles in it, and we see it as something that's meant to break down and like a common thing that's meant to be painful. As you get older, you're just meant to have back issues, but you're not. And it's just because it's just where have we deviated from human anatomy and training. How's the body meant to be? And if you just look at the muscles on the spine, all these little, it's hard because like some of the images online aren't exactly accurate, and you have to buy like an app or something that has the accurate anatomy. But there's spinal extensor muscles like the erector spinae. There's little ones in between like the multifidus and rotatorus. This is more Brendan's like thing, so I'll stop saying his talking points. But okay, so there's a long range. What you can do with that is you use the shorter range. Okay, so for the spine, the shorter range and the longer range. The shorter range for the spine is this like straight extension range, right? That emphasizes the muscular tissue. But when you start to round at the spine and extend, you lean on these ligaments more, and when you contract from their ranges, you push blood into them. And you want to do it incrementally, so I'd stay at a range and incrementally get stronger there for a few sessions and then increase the range. And then you're starting to gain strength on these ligaments of the spine. And then you can handle things like Jefferson curls, and everyone's like, whoa, that's dangerous for your back. And it is, but you can gradually get there. And it's just how we're meant to, it's like the ligaments are there for a reason. Anyway, so ligaments, tendons have, okay, so back to the ATG point. Sorry, I'm trying not to get sidetracked. There's a long range and short range everywhere on the body. So this rehab principle works everywhere. Tricep, neck, which is a video I've just made today, and I'm trying to have that out. I'm making an uncut version, and then just for like the rehab purely, and then I'm going to be making like explaining more of the principles and whatnot, what's going on, and just explaining really accurately like the bedrock up fundamental principles of what's going on. What else? Okay, yeah, so for the knee, the short range would be backwards walking, concentric only, removing the eccentric, and then full knee bend. For the tricep, shorter vascular range would be like that, right? And then longer range, under more stretch, would be like a French press. And I'll try not to say any points that have already been, but like Tom Platz, he had the best legs in all of bodybuilding history, and it was because he trained through a long range of motion. And when you go through these longer range of motions, you're able to access fibers that are more deeper and closer to the insertion, and you start to contract from and utilize those fibers. And also when you a nuanced intimation of mine is that when you contract from those longer ranges, you're also, blood is being pushed into that range as well more, and that's a slight intimation from me being as damaged as I've been. And you can't notice these things. You can, but if you're not as damaged, you can't really notice it. And the more damaged you are, the more vital knowing these details of the rehab principles become. And so it's really important that I just want to lead with these principles and be transparent about them as much as possible, because that's what I needed. And if I just understood those principles sooner, I wouldn't be, staring death in the face every day. And I just wish I knew about them sooner. And so, yeah, everything that I say, I'll be transparent about and will be for free. But I have to figure out how to also make, how to turn it into a business eventually. And so, what else? So yeah, there's a short and long range everywhere. The shorter range, I class it as short to mid-range, and mid-range is more like the muscular range really, where you just emphasize the muscle and don't really hit the tendon. Yes, you can hit the tendon, but it's not the pinnacle of how you can hit a tendon. And obviously for rehab, you might want to scale it back because the compression that comes with full range really does stress the tendon, with full knee bend or something. But it depends, where you are, where you lie on that scale, and your current range of motion. But yeah, you don't want to progress range too fast. You want to whatever range you have, you might want to gain range at that strength and gain strength at that range and then gradually increase. I did charge my phone today, but it's fucking dead. It's alright. What else do I talk about? Yeah, so that's what ATG's figured out. And ATG learned from Charles Poliquin. Now, Charles was the most successful strength coach in history by a landslide. It wasn't even close. He had Olympic gold medals in 15 different sports, and no other coach at his time came close. I think the closest was 1 or 2 in different sports. So he obviously knew things and understood things. And a famous quote of his that pretty much summarizes this whole thing and what this ATG thing is about and whatnot is that what made him so much more better, and what made him, Ben Patrick and Keegan Smith were disciples of Charles Poliquin. And his quote was that if you're waiting for scientific studies and literature to prove something before you try it and test it out in your training, then you're going to be waiting a long time, and decades even, multiple decades. That's if it's done correctly and if it's done honestly, and accurately enough too. And that's why he was more successful. He wasn't afraid to safely try things in his training. And that's kind of my message to you guys, is because I hear that a lot when I'm helping people out. It's well, what's the science? It's just proved by science, yeah. And it's honestly, it's just not. It's just a new thing. Concentric only rehab is a new thing. And you can be arrogant and stubborn and dismiss it casually and be short-sighted about it. Or you can inquire and see what the anecdotes are and the testimonies, how much more effective it is. Because this concept and principle is not yet in the curriculum in universities. And so it takes a while to get them on board and have this idea make sense to them, and be living proof of that. And that's what I'm going to try to be. And it's not in the system. And the system's really talking a lot about eccentrics, which are just garbage and so damaging for the most damaged people, because you're not giving them a blood flow pump. You're just ripping them through eccentric. You're going to long range with eccentrics. Cold, and it's just not like I've had a physio that was like, oh, that's strange. So you do the concentric and then the eccentric, because we were taught eccentric, like we were taught 2 up, 1 down, and that's not emphasizing the concentric as much and really emphasizing the eccentric on a limb. And ATG's approach is pretty much the opposite, where 1 up, 2 down, which is really emphasizing the concentric and really trying to cheat the eccentric. That's another thing with rehab, is that you really want to cheat the eccentric as much as possible. I know it's so counterculture, because you would have heard like, oh, you really want to control the weight, and that's good. But if you're damaged in rehab and struggling, like, you want to remove the eccentric as much as possible and really get a good pump and stimulus and less damage in rehab. And it's so cool. So that knowledge isn't yet taught in the rehab curriculum, and so it's just it's not as known yet in the system. And so I'll hear people like comments that I've seen that have like, sort it out, go see a doctor, and it's like, I've been to a bunch, I've seen so many. I've seen a bunch of physios and they gave me like crab walks and eccentrics, and it's just, I did it, it sucked, it fucking hurt way more, and I just rather stick to my own rehab. And it's cheaper, like, I don't have to go there, you know, I save money. And so it's just, yeah, anyway. So I think the last point I want to make is that I've heard doctors and physios say that, I've heard medical professionals say that tendons are meant to be really thin. Now the thing with, so there's anabolic properties in tendons, and what that means is that they can hypertrophy. Now they can't hypertrophy it as much as a muscle can, because it's a more vascular tissue and it can heal. But what you can do is grow that tendon. The thing that I've heard from medical professionals with my experience from that system is that they say that tendons are meant to be thin, and they're not meant to be thick, and they're meant to be elegant and thin. And I think that is wrong, like severely. Because, and I understand what they're referring to. What they're referring to is when, like, I've met someone from church, she ruptured her Achilles and her whole ankle was swollen up. And what happens with a tendon, when you shear it like that and really damage it, is it swells up, and that makes sense. And I understand that, and I'm aware that they're talking about that, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's just like a muscle. It's like a muscle, similar. It can grow thicker and hypertrophy, obviously at a slower rate, but you can't just tell me that a thicker tendon with more integrity and is stronger and able to hold more than a thinner tendon. Like, that just makes no sense. Like, it just makes, like, if you have a titanium rod and then you have a thicker titanium rod, and you're trying to tell me which one has the most tensile strength, or a cable, which one's, and it's the same material, it's like, where in your right mind? Like, I know you've been taught that, but just take a step back from that and just think, does that actually make sense? Because it fucking doesn't to me, and other people, and a lot of people from ATG. We all have beef with the system, because what they're talking about and doing is so upside down, and it's just the way it is, either good intent or not. Like, it's just the way it is. Like, I've heard a medical professional say that, you know, tendons can't grow, and that's false, because when you rupture a tendon, it's like, no, they're not meant to grow. When you rupture a tendon, when you have a fully rupture, you have to reattach it back to the bone, and the tendon also grows back onto the bone once you put it in place. So to say that tendons can't grow is the most backwards pathological shit that I've ever encountered. And I hate hearing when people say tendons are meant to be thin, because they're not. They're not meant to be thin and weak. You can't tell. Like, imagine if you had a bunch of sticks, right? Like, you know how Caesar from Planet of the Apes is like, apes together strong. And it's such a weird comparison, but if you have a bundle of sticks and then you take a chunk of them out, obviously it's going to be weaker. Like, there's just, it's just
Pretty thin and feathery.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so much to it. So you might I'm saying some other ones like things like that's usually pathological one. Some damage. So normal tendons aren't full. Oh, yeah. Unless they're you can improve them like information. Yeah, you can do what you can. Yes and no. What am I doing? No, your tendon looks perfect, is what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is you've seen people with thick tendons. Thick tendons, they don't like to see them anymore. The stress on it. Yeah, because that's damage. How's the damage? What do you mean? It's disorganized. No, you don't develop more fibers. It's disorganization of the tissue is when you see a tendon.
You don't develop more. You can lay new connective tissue down.
You can, but not in a healthy way. So a healthy tendon does not get thicker. A damaged tendon gets thicker. How's it? That's what happens. Is it like a fibro? No, so like it's like disorganized tissue. So if you think of a healthy tendon like a new piece of rope, thousands of fibers making up, and they're tightly packed together. When you damage a tendon, you tear the fibers microscopically, and then it gets thick. So it's not like you lay down your tissue and you get a really grumpy, strong tendon. It doesn't matter whether you're 5 foot or 7 foot tall, your patella tendon, your Achilles tendon, all those tendons are pretty much the same size. There's slight variation, but very, very little. So yeah. So it's supposed to be thin, it's supposed to be normal, but like it looks really healthy and patella tendon also. What else would it be if I'm trying to find out? Are you having pain in the thumbs in your right leg? It's like
just, they've been taught that so much, and that's what is currently up to date in the curriculum. And they memorize that so much, and then it's in their culture, and then the culture of all the medical professionals believe that. And if you, yeah. And so I think that's what ATG is a part of, and we're just trying to pick up the slack and just help people. That's really what we're just trying to do. So, but unless you have this deeper explanation, you can't really see or pick up the details. And so I just wanted to come on and say that. I think my phone's gonna die. But yeah, thanks for watching. My phone's on 1%, so I might just cut out at any moment. But I'm very excited. I want to start finding a way to post daily, but I've been really like caught up in editing, and I'll get too jumbled with my edits, and it'll get so complex that it's just overwhelming. So I just wanted to sit out and just try sitting in front of the camera and just see what came out. But I appreciate it if you watch this. You're a real one.